Welcome back to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, the most inspiring place on earth. My name is Jake Ray, and I'm the Youth and Education Manager here in Canton, Ohio at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and we are excited to bring you another awesome Before the Snap series here today. If you are the first time watching this program, first off, thanks for tuning in. You guys are going to learn a lot about all the different careers in and around the NFL, and our special guest today has a very, very unique career with the San Francisco 49ers out there in California. If you're a returner and you're back to watching us again, thank you so much for tuning in. You guys, like I said, are in for another excellent program. You guys are going to learn all about those different careers in and around the NFL, not just a player, not just being a coach, but there are so many cool and unique careers that you can have in sports. Before we dive in and we talk about our special guest today, I want to talk a little bit about the Pro Football Hall of Fame. You know, our mission here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame is to honor the heroes of the game, to preserve its history, to promote its values, and to celebrate excellence everywhere. And those values we promote are those of commitment, integrity, courage, respect, and excellence. All values that make our Hall of Famers great on the field. They make great athletes, they make great people, but they also make good employees. And we're going to talk how those values influence both football players as well as people who work in and around the NFL, as they are a huge part of any job of anybody's life when you look at it from that perspective. Before we get started, before we jump into our special guest, there's a few thank yous. First of all, our special guest, Mr. Jesse Lovejoy today. Thank you so much for being a part of this program. We know the game of football, isn't just a fall and winter job. It's every day of the year, all around the calendar, all around the clock type job. So we appreciate you, all the work you give to your team there in San Francisco and everything you do for the game, and truly for us here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, because everything you do, does reflect to us here in Canton, Ohio, the home of all the greatest to ever play the game. Secondly, I'd like to thank our teachers and administrators who allowed us to come into your classroom today. We know this year has been crazy, learning so many different ways. So we just appreciate you allowing us to be a small part of your day here today. And then lastly, I'd like to thank our students. Without you guys today, this program isn't going to take place. So if all of our students who are watching us on Facebook today, whether you're a high school student, a college student, or even if you're a young professional or you've been in your career 20 plus years, make sure you leave a comment, ask a question for us to get today. Leave your name, what school you go to or where you work, and your question, and we'll do our best to get it in as part of the program today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our special guest, Mr. Jesse Lovejoy. Jesse Lovejoy is the Director of 49ers Education and the San Francisco 49ers Museum. He is also the Managing Partner of the EDU Academy. He joined the 49ers in 2013 when he was brought on to envision and implement the educational and community programming for the 49ers and to develop the content and operating structure, the plan for the 49ers Museum. While spearheading the 2014 launch of the museum, is a 20,000 square foot facility with 11 unique gallery and exhibit spaces exclusively dedicated to all those great 49ers. And I can tell you, we've got some of them here too. So there's got to be a lot of great things on display out there. He concurrently led the 49ers into a domain where no professional sports organization had gone before, a comprehensive STEAM education program for students in grades K to 8, completely free to the end user, which is awesome and cool to see. Before the 49ers, though, he was with the San Diego Sports Commission and Hall of Fame champions, and he was also an educator and a teacher. Graduated from San Diego State University, CSU. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our special guest today, Mr. Jesse Lovejoy. Jesse, thank you so much for being part of the program today.
Jake, man, thanks for having me and for the super kind introduction. And I will echo your thanks to the students out there that are joining us, to the educators who we work with daily, and to everybody who's sharing your time with us. I really appreciate the chance to chat with you. And I'll just say quickly, I'd love to know where you're all tuning in from. So let me know where you're at, all across the country. It's good to have a sense of who I'm talking to.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you being a part of the program today. And the first question I want to ask, with the title, especially specifically, two different really forms to your job. You have the education side and you have the museum side. So let's pretend it's a normal year, day-to-day basis. What does your job with your title consist of?
Yeah. First of all, pretending it's a normal year, it sounds like a great respite. I'll take that any day. Yeah, so I oversee two divisions of the organization. So the 49ers Museum is exactly what you said it is. It's been around since 2014. It's 20,000 square feet inside of Levi Stadium. A very state-of-the-art interactive building dedicated to the past, present, and future of the San Francisco 49ers, our 5 Super Bowl trophies, and all of the men who have helped make it so and who will continue to help make it so. So it's, overseeing that business, everything from, how does the building run to how do we work with special events? How do we support content needs on the team side? How do we get creative about building new programs and exhibits to bring people into the space? The things that you all know there very well. Partnering with organizations like yours to do cool things to get people interested in our team and in our building. So that's, to get very kind of granular, that's everything from budget management to staff management to customer service to exhibit design and development, all those kind of things. On the 49ers EDU side, it's similar in nature in the sense that I'm overseeing that business as well, but very different in terms of what it is. And you spoke about it briefly, and I will also stay brief now, because I think we'll probably get into it more later. But that program is, again, in a normal year, a kindergarten to 8th grade focused education program that teaches the concepts of science, technology, engineering, art, and math through the lens of Levi Stadium and the San Francisco 49ers. So we have a custom curriculum that we wrote that's aligned to state and national standards, education standards, and primarily comes to life through a field trip program that we run at Levi Stadium, through a teacher training program that we run, through a series of special events, and through some other kind of partnerships that we do throughout the community. So in a normal year, we would have 60,000 participants or so come through our program every year. They come to the stadium, they spend 5 hours with us. We have 4 classrooms built into Levi Stadium, one of which is in the museum proper. And they would go and do a series of things with us, including tour the museum, tour the stadium, do a lesson in one of our classrooms, and then go out and do some kind of PE component. So overseeing that is no less or more complex than the other, but different, right? So I have a staff of 6 full-time employees that run 49ers EDU, a staff of 3 that run the 49ers Museum. And on the EDU side, it's more about, how are we engaging schools and partners? How are we delivering a really, really rigorous, powerful, compelling education experience? How are we ensuring that the kids who most need to have the chance to come see us can come see us, and all the things that go into that. So I'm an educator at heart. I'm somebody who cherishes the opportunity to recognize history and the power of that at heart. So that kind of comes to life through all the work.
I definitely hold a soft place in my heart for sure. Working on the education side here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, doing a lot of the same stuff that you talk about there. And, I can speak from personal experience, growing up, all of my family were teachers. I grew up around the education field, but, it just wasn't for me. But I love sports, and I found a niche that I really, truly enjoy here at the Hall of Fame. And I think that's a huge component of a job like working with an NFL organization, working with a sport. Specifically, in the kind of the niche that we're in, is you definitely have to love what you do. So just want to throw that out there. Why do you do what you do? Why do you love going to your job every day?
Well, it's funny. Our backgrounds sound very similar. So, I was in another profession for about 9 years out of college. Just realized it wasn't for me. Always loved coaching and working with kids and mentoring. And a transitional moment for me was joining the Big Brothers Big Sisters program in San Diego. As you mentioned, I went to school at San Diego State. When I did that, I started to kind of mentor academically and just personally my little brother. And I realized that I needed to get into something that was more aligned with my passion, which is working with young people. And so I started dabbling in teaching. I substitute taught for a little while in San Diego. I taught English for about 2.5 years at a language academy, which was really neat, because I was teaching kids English who were coming to the US from different countries who needed to get certified in English so they could get their graduate degrees in the States. So very cool, immersive kind of learning experiences. And then I got a job with the Hall of Champions, like you mentioned, and I was overseeing all of the development and management of its youth programs. And it had a really robust set of those, but they were all just strictly kind of sports skill based. So teaching kids how to, play sports. And I started to kind of toy around with this idea of, okay, if I have kids, with me, paying attention to me because I'm teaching them how to kick a ball or shoot an arrow, I can teach them about leadership and goal setting and smart decision making, and then ultimately other kinds of more academic concepts. And once I started to do that, I realized, kind of similar to you, this is what it is. This is what I want to do. And then I got super lucky. I grew up in Santa Cruz, California, which is about 60 miles south of San Francisco. My father was a newspaper photographer for 40 years here and used to take me up to Candlestick to watch the Niners play all the time as a kid. And the Niners, when they relocated from the city to Santa Clara, which is where Levi Stadium is, they put out a job posting for a museum director and an education director. And both of them were kind of come build something from scratch. And I knew that I would have the opportunity to take the brand of the Niners, the power of sports and specifically football, and then this really cool, innovative venue like Levi Stadium, and turn that all into like a plateau, something that I could use as a way to bring kids to us and get them excited about really important subjects in their lives. So that's a really long way to say the reason I do what I do is I love to see young people embrace things. I like to see their lights turn on. I like to see, my staff interact with a young person and change their day. I realize the power that sports have on young people to get them to see new things in themselves, to believe in themselves. And then the museum is just the best possible way to connect with people that love the same team that I do, and have formed these incredible bonds through the game of football and through the Niners. And I'm sure many people that are watching this, and yourself included, can go back to these moments in time when you were young, or even when you're as old as you are now, and think about like these transcending moments where I was watching this game, or I was in this at this tailgate, or I was doing this. And those kind of things and the power of being involved in those for all of our fans is just really, really special to me.
Absolutely. And I think and personally, everything you just talked about, kind of echoes the same for me. You just take out 49ers and put it in Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I can say the exact same things for sure. Just want to let you, we do have some students comment here. We've got the University of Cincinnati, Georgia State, Temple, the University of Central Florida, University of New Mexico, and Ohio's own Ashland University tuning in. So if your students are watching, just remember, if you have a question, submit that in there. Tell us where you're from. And we'll do our best to get that question as part of the program.
If you see any Aztecs in there, you make sure you let me know so I can check them out.
All right, I will for sure. You talk about, your career journey there from where you started to where you ended up. And, back in 2016, Silicon Valley Business Journal named you one of the Valley's most influential people under the age of 40. And if you don't know what's the Silicon Valley is, it's where all the up and coming entrepreneurs, business owners, tech guys, that's the hub for all that. So to be named to that list as somebody who works with sports and in the educational realm, what did that mean to you, especially, living and growing up in that area?
It's funny you bring that up, and I didn't know you were gonna. That was a moment where I realized how powerful the work we were doing really was, right? And to your question about the list that I was on and who I was in the room with, it was venture capitalists, it was hedge fund people, it was, just super smart coders, it was, entrepreneurs, it was people that were building low-income housing, it was just all kinds of stuff. And I did find myself standing up there because what we had to do was you had to go up on the stage, and you had, I think, like 30 seconds to make some kind of statement about what the work you did, how it was going to impact people and make people's lives better. And I remember sitting up there looking around at all these people going like, this is pretty incredible. And I don't really know that I belong here based on what they do, but I shortly realized that I did. And it was because of our ability to connect with young people and to inspire them to pursue these subjects, which are really important to their educational trajectories, to our workforce development, to all these kinds of things. It was a really cool moment. My wife came with me, and that was like a mom-dad kind of thing, right? Like a grandma, like send the link to grandma kind of thing. So it was really fun. Thanks for mentioning it. I haven't heard problem.
And you've mentioned so far, and you can see that the passion for what you do is there. And we here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and I'm sure your organization is, well, we're unapologetically football. We know that there's all these different things out there that can teach individuals different life lessons, but football kind of holds a special place in our heart. So for somebody who works in an NFL organization and has been a fan of the game for a long time, what do you think football can teach those who play it, watch it, coach it, that they can use in their everyday lives as well?
Yeah. So before I answer the question, I do want to share my affinity for and respect for the Pro Football Hall of Fame and all the work that you guys do. We've worked in partnership with you on lots of different things. I know a lot of people there, and I think very highly of the organization. So before I get into it, I wanted to make sure that I said that at least once. So look, the game of football, I played it in high school. I didn't play any further than that. I'm around it obviously all the time now. Um, it's something that um, you started off the discussion with values. You started off the discussion with kind of understanding who people are and who you're going to show up as when you interact with somebody else. And I think that those things are central to the game of football. And there are other team sports where it's the same, right? You can't play a team sport and succeed without your teammates and without your coaches and without good relationships. But I think for me, football, even more so than some of the others, because of the nature of the game, the physicality of the game, the difficulty in how it executes and how you play it, more so than other sports, really relies on your ability to build relationships, be genuine, show up to work, do the kind of things that are going to be respected across any occupation anywhere. Some of the guys that I most enjoy being around on our team, both who aren't with us anymore, who are with us now, and who will be with us, are those who are absolutely dynamic on the field. They're amazing at their positions, but they're also available and accessible to do things that are going to benefit other people. Kyle Juszczyk comes to mind. He's a guy that went to school at Harvard, one the best fullback in the league, in my opinion. You watch him play, you can see how hard he works, how much he studies, plays for a guy like Coach Shanahan, who's going to put him into a million different positions and do a million different things. But he's also going to be there to talk to me about his schooling and how that can inspire young people to pursue those things. And you see so much of that in the NFL. And I think a lot of times folks have a strong misperception about the kind of guys that are in locker rooms on NFL teams, and generally assume prima donna, overpaid, underappreciative. That's kind of, I sense that a lot when I talk to people about players. And I love when I get that, because I ultimately get to come back to, like, you have no idea. The chances of there being, a rotten apple in a locker room are just as high as the chances of there being a rotten apple in your place of employment. I mean, it's the exact same. And even more so on our guys, they're conditioned. They want to work with young people. And some are more comfortable on the football side than the education side. But once you can embrace them and tap into that, it's something that I really, really respect. So I know that was a little bit of a ramble, but I want to kind of get back to the spirit of your question, which is football is a way to bring people together, to have them work together on a common goal, and to understand your individuality within that goal, and then be accountable to that, which I think is something that applies anywhere.
Oh, absolutely. And, we talk about those values and how important they are. And it's true that, they impact everybody in a different way, whether you're a football player, you're a businessman, you are a teacher, they all have their different impact on you. And, that's part of what we do here at the Hall of Fame is, we want to promote those values. But like I said at the beginning, we are a museum, just like, the San Francisco 49ers museum out there, and we have to preserve that history. So in order to preserve that history, we've got to have all this cool stuff on display, which I'm sure you guys have out there as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to send it out live to our Hall of Fame gallery. I've got Kara, a great team member of mine here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, is standing in front of an artifact that belongs to one of the greatest 49ers, or maybe greatest football players of all time, to step on the field. So Kara, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Jake. As you can see, and I would like to personally welcome you to the Pro Football Hall of Fame gallery. This may be one of the most important things we have on display in our museum, are these bronze busts behind me. In the history of the game of football, there have been over 300 million people to play that game at all levels. And only 5 million went on to play in college, and only about 29,000 played, coached, or administered the game professionally. Of that number, only 326 players in football history have one of these bronze busts. And Jerry Rice is one of 16 San Francisco 49ers to have that honor. Since we are in such a special part of the museum and next to the bust of 49ers great Jerry Rice, I was just wondering, how do you preserve the history of the 49ers legends in your museum?
Well, thank you. First of all, JR, I'm so glad that you picked him to talk about, because for a Hall of Famer, for a guy who can't walk down the street without being just everyone wanting to hug the guy. He's the most humble and just wonderful person. I'm sure if you've interacted with him, you would know that. So I'm so glad that you chose him to mention. So in our building, we have 11 galleries I talked about. The most, I don't say the most popular, but one of the most popular is our Hall of Fame gallery, where every member of the 49ers Hall of Fame, many of whom are also in your facility, is recognized with a life-size statue. So we have JR, actually, since you talked about him, what we did with the guys who are still with us is ask them, what pose would you like for us to build a statue? And our sculptors are in Brooklyn. They do this amazing, really, really fine detail, artistic work. And so JR picked a pose where he's got his hands in the air after he just scored his 3rd touchdown of the night against the Raiders on Monday Night Football to break Jim Brown's touchdown record. So I have a picture of me with him on one side of that and me on the other side, which is one of like I try not to fanboy out too much. You know, you kind of have to know that you can't really do that all that much. But JR is so cool, and it was kind of a quiet moment, so I got a chance to do that. And so you'll find statues for all of our guys in there. You know, Bill Walsh is standing next to Joe Montana, kind of in this pensive look with them talking on the sidelines. We have Leo Nomalini, our first ever draft pick, sitting on a bench next to Charlie Kruger, who played D-line with him. We've got the $1 million backfield with Wyatt Tittle and Joe Perry and, you know, those guys. So that space is very, very unique and very special to us. So that's the Hall of Fame gallery. And then I won't go into the rest of it, but we just do a really good job of talking about Bill Walsh, showing the timeline of our organization, showcasing the Super Bowl trophies in a really cool way. Big interactive space down below where kids and parents alike can do fun things like, you know, call plays and play games. And so thank you for asking the question, Kara. And yeah, so that's kind of a little bit about our museum. And you can learn more about it at levistadium.com if anybody out there is curious.
All right, Carrie, appreciate you coming live from our Hall of Fame gallery. We just like to give everybody an inside look on, you know, what we look like here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, because like I said, first and foremost, you know, we are a museum. So we've talked a lot about your career nowadays, but, you know, everybody's got that journey they go on, high school, college, all the way up. So let's go all the way back to high school. You know, football player, graduating senior, you know, a lot of people kind of have an idea on what they want to do. Some people don't have any clue what they want to do. So moving forward. So it's kind of a two-parter. You know, when you were in high school, did you have an idea on like, hey, you know, this is kind of what I want to do? And what advice would you give somebody who's currently in high school that is kind of trying to find their niche, trying to find what they want to do with the rest of their life?
Yeah, it's a long time ago. But so I'll say I mentioned my dad worked for a newspaper and he was a sports photographer, always a photographer of all things, but sports was really his passion. So I always thought that I wanted to be a sports reporter. So I went to school for communications, and I thought that was going to be kind of my deal. I was always good at writing. I started writing early on. You know, my dad got me a job like writing articles about Little League championships and stuff. And it's a pretty small paper, so I could kind of get away with that. And it was fun because I would write articles, my dad would shoot pictures. So we got to kind of work together. But so I really got to love writing. And so I thought that was kind of what I would do, right? And then I went to school. I decided to major in communications, and then I got into PR, and that was that other kind of career that I told you about. So it wasn't sports journalism, but it was kind of working in media in a way. So that's kind of, I did actually have a decent sense, but I wouldn't say it was really crystallized until I got to school. I was there by school, I mean college. And I was there for a semester or two and kind of really got a sense for what I wanted to do. As far as the advice I would give to a high school senior, I think the most important thing is define your purpose as much as you can. And it's hard to do at that young age because you need to have a little bit more experience. You need to get punched in the mouth a few times. You need to kind of like go through some things, succeed at some things, fail at others, to really find out what really motivates you. But what I think if I had been as aware as I am now, I think what I would have realized is that sports was really important to me. Relationships were really important to me. And coaching was something that I even did when I was around that age and working with my younger brother and some other kids. And I always really dug it. So I think if I had the opportunity to go back and be more introspective, that's probably what I would suggest. And then the other thing I would say is just be malleable and pliable and explorative. I mean, like you have to keep yourself, although you're increasingly being challenged to pick a lane and go, you've got to stay in a place where you're okay enough in kind of having a sense, but being open and redirecting. Because I think more and more kids are being asked when they're high school seniors or getting into college to be more narrow. And I think that's a good thing if you're certain, but I think it can also be detrimental if you're uncertain and you're kind of forcing yourself into a lane. So try and stay in a place where you're open to new things and you're not afraid to fall on your face, because you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, gaining those experiences, and, the message I always say is I tried to do as many experiences in different places that I could, because I wanted to find where my passion was, but, more importantly, I wanted to find, well, I don't really like to do that, to kind of, direct your way down that path. So, you get to college, especially in the world of sports, networking, relationship building is such a important part of your time at college, and continues down the road. So for somebody who's in college now, working in sports as a young professional, or even, seasoned vet, how important is networking, and what advice would you give to those who are looking to start to build their network to help them make connections down the road?
Yeah, I mean, I got a job without a network, but I think that we're increasingly moving into a space where that becomes more and more important. So I'll say two things, and I'll talk about something other than networking first. And that is, diversify your experiences in college, and you have to hunt for them. So, I mean, for me, I knew that I wanted to write, right? I knew that I wanted to have experience and be in a creative space, not like, paint on buildings or sing and dance, but I wanted to use the written word as a way to kind of express myself. So I sought out an opportunity to write for the Daily Aztec, the newspaper at San Diego State. I sought out an opportunity to write news reports for KCR, the radio station there, where I would come on and be a little small part of the news breaks and read little highlights about the basketball team or whatever. I then I spun that into an opportunity to do like a 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. slot as a DJ on the radio there. I worked in the classified ad office for the paper. I was a marketing representative for a book company. I just threw myself into a bunch of stuff that was kind of either somewhat in line or really in line with what I thought I wanted to be, and some stuff which was totally different. And the most important part of that was I met a lot of people. I experienced a lot of things. To your point, I realized sales was not something that I really wanted to do. But I realized also that sales was really about convincing somebody to believe something. And that's an important skill that you need no matter what job you're going to have, almost any job you're going to have. So that's the first thing I'll say about if you're in school now and you're thinking about ways to kind of make yourself more marketable. And then as far as networking, that wasn't something that I really kind of understood how to do when I was in college. I definitely understand the power of it now. And the piece of advice that I would give to those of you who are now looking to build your networks is it has to be a two-way street. So I have a lot of people who reach out. I try and take every phone call, do every email exchange or whatever with anybody who asks, because it's something that I enjoy. But keep in mind that there needs to be value both ways. And that doesn't mean that it needs to be equal. Like if you're asking somebody to sit with you and give them 30 minutes of their time around how they got to where they're going, and hey, can you give me an informational interview, and hey, can you connect me to this person who's hiring this job? That might outweigh what you have to offer. But what you have to offer is your perspective, is your goals, is your time to prepare for that discussion, is your time to do your homework around what the organization that person works for is and does. And that stuff's really valuable. I can't tell you how much I appreciate when someone calls me up and says, hey, can I talk to you about 49ers EDU? And there's two kind of people. One person will just show up and be like, tell me about it. And clearly they don't know anything about it. And one person will show up with all these questions specifically about how we do what we do, this program, that program, how we fund these things. And those are the conversations that I lean into a lot more than the other, because I can tell that person has spent some time in investing in it. So think of networking as something that has to be symbiotic. It has to work both ways. And it's okay if it's out, if it's imbalanced. But it's, in my opinion, it's not okay to make it just be about you and what you need.
I think that's great and great advice. I was in the same boat, when I was in college. Looking back now, I wish I would have done so much more networking because, granted, you meet individuals, you go to conferences and everything like that, and you do meet people that way. But I don't think I took full advantage of the opportunities there. And I see that now because it doesn't stop when you graduate college. It's something you continue to do. And that's something that kind of rolls us into our next question here. Once you get that full-time job, that's like you don't stop learning. You're learning something new every day to continually make yourself the better, insert your job title there. So for you specifically, what are some ways that you are trying to make yourself the best director of 49ers Museum and director of 49ers EDU that you can be?
Yeah, I like the question. And I'll kind of connect it back to something I didn't mention in the last question, but I will quickly, is that, people want to hire you as a person. They want to have a relationship with you. They want to work for you. They want to, and so when you're thinking about networking early on, remember that it's maybe less about the professional or academic or occupational goal and more about how can you connect with somebody. Because what you'll find in life as you move along and you get jobs and you do things is that life is made so much easier when you're empathetic, when you have good humor, when you know how to stick up for people, when you know how to be accountable. So to answer your question about how I try and be better on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, is just to challenge ourselves as an institution, or both the institutions that I oversee, to try and continue to be innovative and do new things, be willing to fail within those, stand up as tall as I can when things don't work out, and celebrate everybody around when things do. One of the things that I will say is really important about our work at the museum and EDU is that we rely heavily on a lot of different departments within the organization. Whether that be the operations team to actually take care of our building, or the marketing team to help us get our word out about our programs, or football to help us get some guys involved in promoting things, or our alumni department. And I take a lot of pride and a lot of joy in maintaining relationships with the people that work in our organization on every possible level, that make it so when they see me coming, or they see someone from our department coming, and we talk about this a lot in our teams, that I want a smile on that person's face when they know that we're coming to work with them, because we're going to show up, we're going to do what we say we're going to do, we're going to be kind about it, we're going to work really hard, and we're going to do some cool stuff. And so I think being accountable to that, defining your really, really thinking about, and this is very kind of borderline cliche at this point because it's become so popular, but finding your why, really sticking true to purpose, and trying to have that be a part of everything you do, is something that becomes really, really important.
And I think especially in the world we live in today, it's so important, to learn all these new technology forms. We know the world's going through this pandemic, and it has definitely, adjusted how people work on a day-to-day basis. So for you specifically, I know we were talking, not off camera, but on camera before we started live today, on just how, that has impacted your job and, your job as a museum and as your job with 49ers EDU. So how has COVID-19 and this pandemic affected your job, and what are some of the things you have to do because of it?
Yeah, well, there are some very easy, tangible things. Like, for example, the 49ers Museum closed in early March. California being on the front edge is a very, very aggressive state in terms of how it was going to establish curfews and stay-at-home orders and those kinds of things. We found out this week that we won't be opening again for a really long time. So that is a very easy to understand black and white example of how COVID has impacted us, right? So you have something like that. And then you also have distance learning. Father of a kindergartner who's at school downstairs right now on my wife's computer. Our phones are off the Wi-Fi so the bandwidth doesn't get too funky and I don't lose you. Like, you take that concept and you move that forward into the world that we work in, right, on education. And so one of the first things we had to do was say, hey, we've got all this content. We've got these great relationships with K-8 educators all throughout the Bay Area. So what can we do? How can we be helpful? You know, in the early stages of learning from home, it was a wild, wild west. And to some degree it still is, right? Yeah. Parents were teaching, teachers were trying to work with parents to teach. There was asynchronous learning, which maybe to over explain is just like you're giving a kid an assignment to do, not in front of a teacher like this. There's synchronous learning where I'm literally teaching you something right now via Zoom, like let's learn our, you know, A, B, C's in sign language. And so we're like, okay, how can we fit into that world? So we did a lot, and I won't kind of like go through the laundry list of all the programs we've unleashed, but if you want to learn more about it, you can go to the website and go to 49ers EDU. But we essentially took all of our material, made it digital and interactive, and reformulated it and put that out. We've created a series of video lessons that teach kids engineering concepts, you know, physics concepts, science concepts, math concepts that all tie back to our playbook, which again is online. We started to realize that there was a need for kids to actually have physical materials in their hands to support kind of intrigue-based learning. So we started a program called our Playbook Patrol, which takes our textbooks and delivers them to organizations that are handing out meals or handing out learning supplies. And we're continuing to do this, you know, just working with as many people as we can to get our content out. And same on the museum side. You know, one of the first things we did on the museum side was sit down with our social team, our marketing team, and the folks who are just pushing content and saying, hey, here's all the stuff that we would be telling people when they're coming through our doors. So to the degree that it's helpful to you, use it, right? You know, about 6 weeks ago, we started a series that I'm really proud of, a long form article series that does these really cool deep dives on members of our Hall of Fame or stories in our building. And those have been extremely popular. So just, you know, a dramatic impact on the work, and also an opportunity to continue to be innovative and introspective around how we do what we do in different ways.
I think it's a great way to put it, because I can almost say the exact same thing, because that's exactly what we had to do, you know, here in Canton, Ohio as well. Now we've been open since about the beginning of June. So we're very fortunate that, you know, to finally see some fans, some guests and visitors coming to us here in Canton, Ohio. But we had to do the same thing. It was like, all right, we have to sit down and we have to see, we have all this great educational content, all these presentations and programs. How can we help not only teach, but then, like you said as well, help the marketing and digital and social teams and say, hey, we've got all this stuff available, and we're willing, you know, to help push that message out and help, you know, further our mission in a little bit of a different way than we're used to. So it definitely has affected a lot of people, and you can specifically see it there. I got a question here on Facebook. This is from Jackson, who's a student at the University of Cincinnati. He wants to pursue a sport marketing the career in his future, but he wants to know, of your job with the 49ers, what are some of the most difficult aspects that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis?
Thanks for the question, Jackson. I think, you know, the difficult things for me, I try and reframe those things and look at those as opportunistic things, because I don't know that I have a ton of things that I would list as difficult. What I would list as is things are kind of complex. And one of the things that I'll go back to something I said earlier, which is that there are so many systems in place within an NFL team and a stadium. In our situation, and I'm not sure how unique this is, but Levi Stadium is technically owned by the city of Santa Clara and is managed by the Santa Clara Stadium Authority. Levi Stadium Management Company runs the building, and then you have the 49ers who are the tenants. So in our case, we have the museum and 49ers EDU relationships within the team and the management company in order to make our business run. So it's just being very in tune with the mechanics that drive everybody else's world, and then making sure that you're staying in your lane, but also being aware so that when something comes down, like, oh, hey, Beyonce's here at the stadium in a couple of days, and she decided she doesn't want anybody in the bowl for 3 days so they can set the stage up, and she wants it to be a complete surprise. And our program is scheduled to run kids through the 350 kids through the bowl tomorrow. So what are we going to do? Right. So I would say that stuff to me is the fun part of the job because we get to be really creative. But to get specific to kind of like a difficulty or a challenge, I would say realizing that at a moment's notice, things can change and you need to be willing to work through those things and keep your constituent, keep your customer in mind. And I know that example, although maybe not that example, but a similar example would exist in just about any department in our organization. You know, how our marketing folks and social media folks respond when we have games on games on games against great opponents, but there's an election and there's all kinds of stuff. So we want to be considerate of what the world is thinking about, but we also want to talk about, like, we want to beat the Packers next week, right? So they've got to think about how do we do that in a strategic, in a sensitive way. I don't know if that's a good example or a bad one, but you know, I think there's a lot of, to get to other folks in the building, I think that's a consistent thing that you'll find is circumstances outside of your control. How do you adapt to and adjust to and make the best of those?
Now, there's definitely going to be difficult parts, like you said, but, you know, on the flip side of that, there are some pretty cool things that, you know, and I can speak from my experience, you know, there's some definitely cool perks of having a job here at the Hall of Fame. And I'm sure you can echo that as well with your career. So can you think back, you know, throughout your career with the 49ers, specific game, moments, time in your career that stands out kind of as the most special to you throughout your entire time there?
It's a long story. I'll try and tell it in a short way. So I told you that I'm a huge Niner fan. I grew up that way. My favorite player growing up was a guy named Tom Rathman, who played fullback for the San Francisco 49ers for many years. He's in the 49ers Hall of Fame now. When I got hired, Tom was a running backs coach. And I mean, this is ridiculous fandom. Like, I used to go to games and make cardboard signs that say, like, Tom Rathman this, Tom Rathman that. And when I got the job, my dad sent me this picture that he took of me holding one of those signs in Candlestick Park that said, like, Tom Rathman, blah, 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 wearing this old gnarly jacket, Niners jacket. And so I used to see Tom in the morning, every morning, because he's one of these crazy, like, 5:30 a.m. workout guys, like, always in the film room. And I'm an early guy too. So I would see him walking around the complex a lot. And I finally remember getting up the confidence to just say hi to him one morning. And you know, hey, coach, you know, I used to love to watch you play. And he was just the kindest, gentlest guy. And I took him back and I showed him the picture and he signed it for me. And then from that point, we used to have breakfast all the time. And he got to know me a little bit. I got to know him and his family and his daughters. And I remember when my wife was pregnant with our first child, we're due here for our second in about 6 weeks. He asked me a question one morning, and I'll never forget the question. He goes, "Do you like to lift weights more or do cardio more?" Because he knew I was a workout guy. And I said, "I guess I'm more of a cardio guy." He's like, "You're going to have a girl." And I did, which, I mean, there's no science behind that, right? Coach Rathman, I'm sure, is out there, you know, in some way laughing in his mind if he ever heard that. But I'll just never forget that moment where, like, I had this connection with this guy who I used to idolize, who ended up being this amazing person. And it all came through this job in this kind of football world.
I think that's awesome. And, you know, I think everybody who has a job like ours in some aspect has those stories when you see these guys, you see these great legends of the game, Hall of Famers, and you're kind of that shock right off the bat, like, oh my gosh, that's, you know, insert the name of the player there. And then you kind of take a step back, you get to know them on an individual level. It truly shows that you know, that they're just, you know, another guy. And like you said, you know, getting to know them, getting to know the person. And it goes back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier and how important it is, you know, to build those relationships. You know, if you don't have the courage to go up and talk to them, who knows, you know, what your relationship looks like today with them or you know, how it would have been built over time. So it does go to show, you know, even after college, how important it is to build those relationships. You know, at the beginning, you kind of gave us a great overview of what you do and what you do on a day-to-day basis. But I want to go, you know, let's nail down in on what a game day looks like for you. So on a typical San Francisco 49ers home game, what's your day look like? When's it start? And what are some of the things are you in charge of, if anything, you know, when it comes to game day?
Yeah. Well, game days, I mean, one of the hard part about this is that there's still the 13-year-old fan inside here, right? So there's not a game day where I still don't get super excited about the idea that I'm there in a formal capacity, right? So I always work out on a game day, get up real early, go to the gym, do whatever, take a run or something. And then I'm in the building usually about 3 or 4 hours before kick, because the museum opens 3 hours before kick to like suite holders and special guests, and then 2 hours before kick to everybody. We'll have on a game day somewhere between 1,000 and 2,500 people come through in about 2 hours. And our space is big, but that's a lot of people in a very short amount of time. So those are definitely our most important days as a museum business in terms of servicing our true customer base. So on those days, yeah, I'm in there, I'm walking through the space a couple times. My team is double checking everything, making sure all the exhibits are lit right, the interactives are working, we got the place is clean, we got all our staff in there, we have a morning meeting with the docents, we'll say, okay, here's the plan, and then we'll give them a rundown. Okay, so like Fox is coming through right before we open to shoot stuff to use in the broadcast, or hey, Joe's here today with his wife, so he's going to come through for a little bit of time, so we got to find space for them, or whatever, right? And then really on a game day, my team is doing the vast majority of managing kind of like the organism that is the building. And I'm there doing high level customer service, working with sponsors, helping out alumni if they need something. I do a lot of support on the fundraising side for 49ers EDU, because we're funded through the 49ers Foundation. So I'll go meet a lot of folks who might be here that we're either prospecting or who are currently sponsoring our work, and go down and say hi to them, make sure they have a good experience. And then, I always make time for a lap around the field about 45 minutes before kick, because they're generally almost in 7 on 7 at that point, and the energy is always real high. And that's one of the things that I allow myself as a special kind of perk of working for the team, is the chance to go down and experience that, because it's super special and fun. And it really connects you to what we're all there to do in the museum business, which is to remind people about the power of those experiences and to create memories for people and to celebrate memories. So that's kind of it. And then I'll stay for the whole game. I usually just walk around. I'm too anxious to sit down. I've always been that way. And then, so with the museum closes at kickoff, we'll generally have some people come in for halftime, maybe to kind of take a little VIP tour or something. But once kickoff starts, I'm generally done, although there's always stuff that kind of comes up.
Yep, all hands on deck for sure. We got time here for a few more questions before we wrap things up. And, we talked a lot about networking, building relationships, and how important that is. So another two-parter here. How would somebody connect with you if they want to, build that relationship? You talked about, your emails, LinkedIn, social media, all that sort of stuff. Yep. And what advice would you give to somebody who is trying to reach out to build their network?
So you can get me at Jesse Lovejoy #1 is my Twitter handle. You can find me there. On LinkedIn, I think if you just search Jesse Lovejoy 49ers, I'll be the first thing that comes up. I can't remember my URL for LinkedIn. So you can find it there. And then reach out to me through messages. I'll give you my email address. We can start a conversation that way. I did a session like this through our group sales department actually a few months ago with like 500 students. I've had probably 50 to 100 email exchanges since then. So doors open, walk right on through it. So that's part one. And then, part two, I think I'll go back to what I said before around just as you determine who you want to connect with, whether they be someone who's your same age and sits next to you in class and you just want to develop a relationship because you dig the way that person thinks or you feel like you could work well together, or it's your college instructor, or it's somebody that's one level above you at your organization that you work for, or it's a CEO of a Fortune 500 company who you just adore in terms of how they think. In my opinion, the thought process is always still the same, is what do I have to offer to this conversation? What am I asking from this conversation? How do I articulate that in a way where it's clear? And how do I make the most out of everybody's time? And I don't say that to mean, time is money kind of thing, because I don't really a subscriber to that. I feel like you need to do what you need to do and you need to be clear about that. But I'll give an hour or 5 minutes whenever because of my importance in relationships. But keep that in mind. You can't go into what needs to be a two-way street only willing to ask. You have to be willing to give. And give can mean a lot of different things. Give can just mean paying attention to the person and doing research around the person you're talking to. That would be like, to me, the bare minimum threshold. and there's always places you can go from there.
Absolutely. All right. And then the last question we like to end with, and there's been so much great advice, little nuggets of information that truly, I pull away from doing all these programs as well, because it's cool to hear how everybody's different experiences kind of got them to where they are today. And there's definitely a lot of similarities between those, but those differences, those are the true nuggets you can pull out. So if you can sum up, everything we've talked about today, from what it takes, to set yourself up in high school, to networking and building relationships to college, to, your life currently, with your current job, what is one piece of advice you'd like everybody who's tuned in today to kind of take away?
Be kind to people. Just go through your life thinking about how you can make somebody's life better, day better every single day, and it'll end up well for you. That sounds overly simplistic, but I promise you that it'll work. If you live your life in service of others, and I don't say that in a religious way or kind of some kind of cosmic way, I say that in a very practical way, you will find that things will work out for you. So that's kind of part one. And then part two, everybody has a favorite quote, and I have one. It's a Bruce Lee quote, and I might butcher it, but it's be like water. If you pour water into a cup, it becomes the cup. If you pour it into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. If you pour it into a bucket, it becomes the bucket. And the idea there is that you are just there to adapt to situations that are presented. And if you are confident in your ability, if you believe in yourself, if you're aligned to your purpose, and I know that word, again, I've said it a lot, but I mean, really, really defining who you are and what you stand for is the absolute most critical thing that you can do at any stage in your life. And then being accountable to that and thinking about how that manifests, so whatever you determine that is for you, be real about it, be authentic to it. People will sense, I almost said a bad word, but people will sense BS, especially the further along in life you move, and there's less and less tolerance for it. So, and people will respect, even if my idea is different than Jake's or yours, I'll respect his if I know that he's consistently that. So just define who that is, stick to that, be really, really kind to people, live your life in service of others, and you'll find that I think that things will work out.
I think that's a great way to wrap up, a really great way to wrap up this installment of the Before the Snap series here from the Pro Football Hall of Fame with our special guest today, Mr. Jesse Lovejoy. Jesse, thank you so much for being a part of the program today. We know the NFL season's a busy season, no matter if you're working from home or you're working from the office. So we appreciate taking the time out of your day. We hope that this gives the 49ers the little Before the Snap bump this week. If they're playing, get them that W. But before we leave everybody today, just a few quick reminders for all of our audience here on Facebook. Subscribe, follow, like all of the 49ers accounts, both the community and their team account, as well as all of ours here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Follow, like, subscribe, whatever it might be, to stay up with all the great content that's going out here. If you're an educator, if you're a student, there's so many different great resources out there for you to take advantage of. And we say that in a good way, because we want to help you, further your learning. If you're a football fan, do the same thing. We're coming out with all this great content, historical content. If you're a podcast listener, subscribe to our podcast here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, The Mission, hosted by our great friend and teammate here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, Mr. Jameer Howerton, as he interviews people from the game, media members, authors, directors, NFL legends, Gold Jackets, about their experiences throughout the NFL. So stay tuned to all those platforms, and stay tuned as we're beginning to wrap up this semester. Hard to believe, it's almost Thanksgiving, Christmas time here, and we're wrapping up the fall school semester. But stay tuned to us next week, December. We're going to have a special guest from the Tennessee Titans. Her name is Carly Migrants, who works with the Tennessee Titans and their organizations from right here in Ohio, and now is down there in Nashville, Tennessee. So stay tuned and make sure you guys tune with us next week right here on Facebook for that program. Jesse, as I said at the beginning, the game of football isn't just a fall or a Sunday job. It's a 365-day full year time commitment. So we appreciate everything you've done for the game of football from a team level all the way down to a student K-8 level. Truly has made a great impact on the game. So thank you for everything you've done for the game of football. Thank you for everything you do for us here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame and the museum relationship and educational relationship that we have. So for myself, Nathan, Jerry, all of our team here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, all the way up to Mr. David Baker, our president and CEO, I want to thank you for being a part of the program today.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I feel honored to be here. you tell Dave, who I've met a few times, and Salim and Jerry and everybody else that I said hi. I wish everybody out there a wonderful holiday. Be well, stay safe. Enjoy life, celebrate, smile.
All right. With that, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you right here next week, 12 p.m. Eastern time, for our next edition of the Before the Snap series. Thank you, everybody.
Cheers.